The question in my mind is, how do you create or relaunch a highly profitable and successful 6 to 7 figure business? With so much conflicting advice about the best ways to start and grow your business, how do you get it right the first time? I want to help entrepreneurs make a real difference and navigate the messy world of startup or relaunch. My name is John North, and this is the Startup Secrets for Entrepreneur Show. Join me today when we dig deep with our guests and get you the best blueprint so you can fast track your own business. This episode is sponsored by Evolvepreneur.app, your all-in-one online business system. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at startupsecrets.show right now. So let's get into today's episode.
In today's episode, we're going to reveal a new formula to you for business that changes everything. Right now, you're taught sales minus expenses equals profit, and that's the wrong formula. We're going to teach you a new one. Stay tuned and listen in.
Today, our very special guest going to dig in deep about, failures and successes and the challenges they face and how they overcome them. And my very special guest today is Rocky Lalvani, who's a Chief Profitability Adviser for business owners. So welcome, Rocky, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, John. Excited to chat with you today.
Cool. So have you read all those books in the background?
I have.
Good work.
I've read most of them. I haven't gotten to the email one. That's on the list.
Right.
I just finished Who Not How. But the rest, a good chunk of them I've read. I've got more scattered around. I'm working on this one. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Okay. Yeah, see, I like it. Yeah, I'm sort of like, I've got a lot of books. I actually must have put them up a bookcase somewhere because basically I've got a couple of bookcases running and I sort of run about 10 books at a time. But I think that's probably an important thing for an entrepreneur is to read books, because I think you don't learn real life out of books, but you certainly get a good strategy out of it and a good insight into someone else's way they think.
Well, you can learn from their mistakes or you can make them yourself. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, absolutely. I think decade in a day, right? All right, so tell me a little bit about how you got to where you got to now, like in terms of what you're doing now. Did you start off with a job in the first place? Is that typically the entrepreneur's journey?
I did. I was working for the majority of my life, and I call it retired. Mm-hmm. So I retired a couple of years ago and said, now I want to do what I really want to do. Mm-hmm. And for me, I didn't like the seeds of what I do today were there when I was a teenager. I just didn't know how to take the knowledge I had and bring it to the marketplace. And I didn't understand the value that it had, because it was essentially a whole new kind of marketplace in a sense, and in a sense not. Right. So when I was a teenager, I was teaching accountants how to go from paper ledgers to electronic spreadsheets. And the program back then, the first one was called VisiCalc.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that one, because I actually got involved in accounting software. Actually, was one of the second largest Sage distributors in the world. So it was very funny times back then, right?
I didn't realize how powerful spreadsheets were. I didn't realize the value that was there. Mm-hmm. But more so, what I didn't realize my skill set is I can look at spreadsheets and see the story and where the problems are, and I can understand them. I just assumed people knew how to read their financial reports in business. I came to realize 98% of business owners have no idea what their financial reports say.
Yeah, this is actually true, because I probably implemented, I'm trying to remember how many accounting systems, maybe 600-700 or something, did about 3,000 interviews. And I found, exactly that, because when you went in, digged in and realised that they actually had no clue. They didn't read their financials. The accountant never sat down and actually talked to them about it. They said, you made a loss of your profit if you're lucky. You found that out. You got to pay tax, right? That was about all they had to worry about. And I used to go and say, look, I could find $100,000 in an hour without even looking, because you don't even look at your numbers. You don't, and like I was looking through my emails the other day, and I found a $15 a month charge that's been going through that I didn't realise had been going through for a client that I don't even work with anymore, that I've been paying for 2 years. Right? Yeah. And It's not a lot of money,
Happens
but
all
it
the
sticks in
time.
your neck, right? That's like $15 these guys got.
That happens more often than you can imagine at a larger level than 15 and multiply it.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you've got employees, forget about it. Because each one of them is another multiplier on that.
Exactly, because they add on costs that you don't even think of, like even toilet paper nowadays. Like like it's like it can cost you a lot of money because they go through it. So I mean, I think the hidden cost of staffing is a big one because I had $1 million payroll at one point there, and I reckon that it probably easily cost me a couple $100,000 more in terms of all sorts of things like staff mistakes, what they cost you in operating costs, and losing laptops because they walk away without looking back to see whether the laptop was actually still at the coffee shop. Like $3,000 laptop gone out the window. And so I mean it's an interesting sort of area, I think, and we used to have this rule that was a 5% plus 5% minus 5% minus 5% equals 67%, and that was the math that we used to work on. And it doesn't make any sense, right? Because it used to be like, if you increase your sales by 5%, decrease your cost of sales by 5%, and decrease your expenses by 5%, mathematically, you'll end up with a 67% increase in profit at least.
Right. So let me, I tell a similar story. You're a $1 million business owner, right? So you got $1 million in sales. You made $100,000 in profit last year. Next year, I want to double my profit. The normal thing everyone says is, okay, well, go from $1 million to $2 million in sales, and now you'll have $200,000 in profit. A couple of things wrong with that. One, that's a lot of work.
Yes.
Two, when you do that, more than likely, your profit goes down because you start to lose sight of the bigger picture.
And you ramp your marketing up, obviously, too. You've probably ramped your marketing up, which is a big cost.
Exactly. So what I tell business owners is, why don't we do something a lot simpler? Let's raise our prices 10%. So that immediately takes your profit from 100,000 to 200,000 without you doing any extra work.
Yep.
And let's cut our costs by about 10 or 11%. And that adds another 100,000 to the bottom line. So just by cutting costs, raising prices, we went from 100,000 to 300,000. And now you can go home and enjoy your family.
That's hard work. And I think the crazy thing too is that, number one, if you increase your prices, you have to get better at selling sometimes. So it improves your business overall. You have to get better at servicing because you're charging more in your own mind, because some people can't struggle with that, right? They really struggle with the idea of increasing prices.
I think sometimes people undervalue what they deliver.
I think most times they do. I would say 80% of the time when you talk to someone, I said to a lot of clients that you could double your price and it still wouldn't matter. In some cases, some businesses, you could double your prices and lose half your client base and still be okay.
Well, wait, so we doubled our prices, we lost half our client base, so now we're working half as much and still taking home the same amount of money.
Exactly.
Actually, a lot more money.
That's probably.
That's the kind of thinking that has to change. Is understanding those concepts. But everyone's afraid to lose half their customers. But they don't realize the people who leave are probably the ones who were the biggest problem. Even though you lost half your customers, they were 80% of your time.
Well, the old 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your time is spent with 80% of the like that. Oh, sorry, that's wrong anyway. 20% of your time is spent with the wrong customers. In some respects, because if like the big customers that hardly spend any money with you, spend a lot of time with them. Ones that you actually never talk to, the ones that pay the most amount of money, I find. Like it's like you should reverse that, because if you talk to them more, they might spend more money with you, and you can get rid of the ones that actually don't really make money out of it for you at all. Yeah. And the bank has a system. Like I worked for a bank for 10 years, and they have a system doing that. They grade customers. And so if they find the customer's high risk or pain in some respect, whatever, in their criteria, they increase their percentages of their overdrafts or whatever they're charging you, because you actually get, pain in the bum money charges, right? And so you'll leave them because you go, oh, they're charging me too much, but the bank wanted you to leave. And if you didn't leave, they're perfectly happy to take more interest from you.
That's how you get rid of your worst customers, raise their prices.
Yeah, because they usually come in on price, so they'll leave on price, right? Used to have a saying with the staff: if the salary was the major reason they started with you, it would be the major reason why they'd leave you.
Sounds very true. You got to do it based on values.
So when you sort of retired and moved into an online business, I'm guessing, so what inspired you to do that in the end? Like, was there a reason that you did it? Outside, obviously, working a lot of hours and getting nowhere, like most people eventually get them to.
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty good job. It was a high-paying job. It was not very stressful or it wasn't a ton of hours. It just got to the point where the company was going through changes and I knew how they would behave. And I was like, I'm out of here. I'm not playing this game again. So that was part of it, I think. I could have gone somewhere else and done the same thing, but I realized this isn't what I loved. And if I waited 5 years to start doing what I loved and I was really successful at it, I would be really mad at myself for giving up those 5 years. You know, the older you get, the more time becomes valuable and the less money becomes valuable.
Yeah. Funny how it feels.
So for me, it was a time game. It was, let's just go do this. Let's try it and see what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, what worst case scenario, you've got qualifications or got some stuff, you can always go and get a job again, can't you? Like, that's always what an entrepreneur tells themselves. I think at the end of the day, you eventually become unemployable because a normal employee wouldn't cop what you normally do as a self-employed person anyway, I don't think. Even though you probably get better results, right? Like, I read somewhere the other day, it said that the typical, and I still believe this is right, the typical 9 to 5 scenario is so old-fashioned when you think about it. It was designed to keep people in work in factories during the daylight hours, basically. It wasn't never designed to be the perfect scenario that 8 hours work was actually, the right number. No one really know. I think not much work gets done at work, I found, because the first hour or so, nothing was done because they were still getting there, waking up. And then the last hour was like thinking about going home. And so if you got 4 hours a day out of them, I think you're being lucky, in some respects.
I don't worry about hours. I worry about results.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a result in an hour that can make a lot of money. I mean, I remember ringing up the tax office years ago when we had some tax debts, and we rang them up, and they said, "Oh, you paid it back now. You're all good." I go, and then he says to me, you can get an interest refund now you've paid it back. You know that? And I go, yeah. And I said, yeah. He said, you just got to ask me for it. And I go, okay. So I said, okay. Well, how much? What's some interest refund? He said, well, just thank you for asking. We'll have a little look. And he comes back and says, how's $18,000 sound? And I go, what? And so that was a now conversation that made $18,000. I could have like the next 3 months off theoretically, and it's like you made enough money in an hour. So I think sometimes the quality of the conversation, I think, is what it comes down to. Like that, having that quality conversation with someone that's of some sort of value like that. Yeah.
Which means you have to listen.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, well, they say they give you 2 ears and 1 mouth, but I don't think anybody figures that one out. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever given to someone in terms of, a client or... So
what I do is profit first, and profit first changes everything. So everyone is taught, you're an accountant, you work in the accounting field. We're all taught sales minus expenses equals profit.
Yes.
So profit's a leftover. What we teach our clients is sales minus profit equals expenses. So you take your profit first and you constrain your spending, because every single one of the business owners that I work with has the same problem. They spend too much. Oh, I get it. It's a business expense. Oh, I need this. I need that. This shiny object, that shiny. Like, enough. Stop spending so much money. You're wasting most of it.
And you're spending out of the bank account when it's got cash in it, right? So, then there's no cash in it because you spent the money. It makes a lot of sense. And I think the thing is, what people tend to do too is they'll look at the profit and they'll kind of make it I'll make 10% of my turnover as a profit. So they'll try and increase their sales theoretically to get more money. And the reality is that's a hard job in some respects. Particularly if you're just going out and spending money on marketing or whatever, you're going to spend more money on and probably make less profit as a result. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Control your destiny and create a complete business system for your online business. Evolvepreneur.app offers an easy and cost-effective way to build your online business by helping you avoid the pain and stress of implementing multiple systems, giving you the freedom to automate and scale. Support our sponsor by grabbing a free copy of Startup Secrets for Entrepreneurs at evolvepreneur.app.
rapid growth results in business failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing nobody wants to hear.
Yeah.
Your top line might look great, and your profit might even look great, but your cash flow might be imploding.
Yeah.
And before you even know it, you're sucker punched and out of business.
And it's interesting, when I was working with this accounting company, that they used to put 30% increase in sales every year. That was the increase they had to get. On everybody, this is Sage, right? They actually had this, and I probably still do, 30% growth year on year. That's a massive number. And so that people would do all sorts of weird things to try and meet those numbers. But the reality is that wasn't a sustainable thing. And what would happen is that CEO of that division would get the sack 6 months later because he didn't achieve his sales goals, and they put someone else in. And so it was a constant turnstile of people. And you look at that and you think that's just unsustainable, as a business thing. And I think, but the reasoning behind it probably wasn't what they thought it was. The reasoning behind it was possibly to make the shareholders like the business, go, look at the growth we've done, right? We've grown this business, and who cares about the profits? Like, nobody looks at that as long as they get their dividends, right? But they're not looking at the bottom line. They're looking at the top, as you say, looking at revenue, trying to make revenue look sexy when really profit's sexy.
So we talk about that. Top line is vanity, bottom line is sanity, and cash flow is reality. But everyone looks at the vanity number, and it's just not good.
Yeah, because there's a lot of money lost in sales. I mean, I look at the years that I've sort of done, and we've probably done $20, $30 million worth of sales in these businesses over years. But how much of that do you actually end up getting to keep?
Not a lot, many times.
Yeah. So how do you find your ideal client? Like, what's your current strategy looking for your ideal client? That's usually a hard one for most small business.
So I have 3 paths for clients. One is referral partners. Mm-hmm. One is networking. And the third is podcast. So my podcast is essentially a funnel that people come and listen to, and I do nothing but teach and share. And some people say, hey, I like this guy. I've been listening to him. He makes a lot of sense. And I just don't want to do this. I'd rather pay somebody to do it. And it sounds like he knows what he's doing because he's been sharing all this great information. So the 3 all go together. And that's kind of how it works out well for me.
Sounds nice. And obviously, it's a nice way to kind of show what you can do before in advance, really, so people get the impression that they can understand. If you can talk about stuff, then they know you must know about it.
Correct. And I have my competitors on. I have my clients on, so they get to see the real picture. And probably spend more time with them than they would have normally anyway, particularly in a pre-sales environment too, because at the end of the day they don't get the experience. And they're going to they're going to learn everything that I tell my clients, and I share it all with them, and then it's up to them. Like, if you can do it yourself, great, congrats, go do it. Glad I could help.
So are you doing their accounts work, or are you more looking at strategically looking at what they're doing and sort of coaching around that? Is that what you normally do? We're
doing the strategic work. So I'm digging into their accounting. Like we talked about before, nobody's looking at their financial reports. I'm looking at them. I'm going, hey, your profit margins are off. I can look at somebody and go, you have a pricing problem. Oh, you have a spending problem. Oh, you have a sourcing problem. Like, you're paying too much for your goods. Like, let's shift the way you do things. And so I can tell within the business owner what his major problem is. Big part of it is accountability. A big part of it is awareness. And, we sit together. I tell them what happened. I show them what can happen. We figure out how to make a change. And then I hold them accountable to the change.
So do you find a lot of them, and I used to find this a little bit, is that the reporting in the first place was bad? So that the actual extraction of the expenses, so you'd find this big expense account and you go, what's in here? And it's like, it's just everybody's chucked things in there. It hasn't been properly coded in terms of what it's supposed to be. And it's misreporting the numbers in some cases.
I find mistakes all the time. all the time. And I bring them up to them and they share it with their bookkeeper or accountant or whatever, and we fix it. But yeah, I see mistakes all the time. It's normal.
And I think the danger is that, people have bookkeepers that they've hired to do work and find out that the actual, and I found this a lot when I was implementing accounting systems, is they'd come in and you start asking questions, and the bookkeeper would get very stressed because the bookkeeper's knowledge level wasn't what you thought they were, because there was the smoke and mirrors thing going on where basically you thought they knew what they were doing, but actually they were just coding things whatever they thought was the best thing. And I had a client just recently like that. I've been pushing for a decent set of accounts so we can actually manage their business properly. And basically the bookkeeper in the end rang him in tears. And it's like, she's under pressure now. Like, you can tell. And I said, I've been through this so many times. It's always the data entry people that get very stressed because they know that they're probably doing it wrong. And rather than just saying, okay, well, teach me, show me, they get panicky and they'll quit, or they'll try and change them, or they'll try and sabotage the whole thing. I've seen that a lot.
So what I'm seeing now is everyone is relying on automation, but the automation's broken. And so things are just showing up in places they don't belong, and they're not double checking. They're just clicking a box, send it wherever, and they move along.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Think about this. If 98% of people aren't looking at the reports, they're getting away with it 98% of the time.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, QuickBooks has got a great little feature where you can actually record, like save a transaction and get it to learn it next time. But I train my guys to say, look at that and ask the question, is that right? I think that to me is that right before you click that button?
And that is where the problem. Somebody accidentally memorizes a transaction the wrong way, or it's a type of transaction that can come in a multitude of different ways. And the next thing you know, you've got a disaster. I see that all the time.
And you're making decisions about that too then as well. Like you're actually making, could actually be imposing on themselves. I remember last year or early this year, I decided to buy a new car, and I sort of set the target of what I want to pay per month, and then I looked into in the thing. So I need to find $500 a month in expenses that I can get rid of to pay for at least a fair chunk of this. And probably took me 2 hours, and I found $500. And it's like, there you go. So you pay for yourself. So I think some cases, it's like set yourself an exercise in expenses and go looking for things to see what you can do to decrease it, and chances are you can pay for something and cost you nothing ultimately, and that's probably the better way to do it than, as you say, spend the money and then you still got those expenses coming through that you could have got rid of. I wish I found the $15 now. It's still sticking to my neck now that I didn't find that $15 when I'm looking.
You have to, every so often you really need to dig deep.
And big businesses do it, don't they? They get in there with the razor blade and they run through their business and they cut a lot of expenses. And I think that's the thing that the small businesses are reluctant to do in terms of firing staff or making those bigger decisions that they think might impact them. So what's your goal for the next 12 months? What's your plans in your business? Have you got, obviously not a massive growth?
No, my business is at this point, it's essentially full. So I'm happy with that level. Level 2 now, we have a course that teaches how to do profit first. So I think the goal going forward is to start promoting that a bit more. I haven't really been spending much time promoting it, and we're going to continue to promote it, beef it up and add to it, and really allow the smaller business owner who can't afford my services to be able to learn and do it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's about impact. I think as you get older, you realize that the more impact you make, and the trouble with one-on-one is very slow, and you're only impacting the people who really want to change in some respects. The other people probably might change if they actually had some more information, right? People will change their attitudes with more information, but if they can't afford it, then they're not going to spend it.
Correct. And so I think what we're trying to do is offer something at that lower price point to help people.
So you're going to write a book then? Because plenty of books. You've read plenty of books.
No, well, the book is already written. Mike wrote the book, Profit First. I realize the amount of work that goes into writing a book.
Yep.
And I'm like, you know what? It just doesn't excite me. For me, the podcast is much more fun.
So you're actually
that's
writing a
what
book every time you do a podcast, ultimately, because you're actually almost writing the chapters. In some respects, what we've seen some people do, which is probably not a bad idea, is to just take the transcriptions of the podcast and make that the book and just publish the book.
Yeah.
And that's like in some respects, that's a way to kind of do a book without actually having to write a book. And people find value in it because basically it's, some people like to read rather than listen anyway.
Correct. Yeah, and so that's one possibility, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm in no rush to write a book because I realize how much work it is. And writing the book is only 10%. Promoting the book is the other 90%, which is even more work that I do not want to do.
Yeah, fair enough. Because at the end of the day, like I think without some sort of reasoning for doing books and stuff like that, and if you haven't got a desire to do it, then ultimately, writing it almost just becomes an ego thing. And I think a lot of people want to write a book for a legacy point, and it's not. It's better writing a logic book and actually having a reason for writing it. A lot of times what we do is we make sure that people can write books without actually writing a single word. We've got a method for doing that, and I think that's the strategy. I think the whole concept of seeing and writing a book could take years. To write a good book, yes, would take, or a great book will take you 2-3 years. And it's not an easy process in that respect. If you want to write a good book, you can do that in probably 90 days, but to write a great book, you need time.
You do.
Cool. So, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given in terms of your side of things? I mean, I've always had this concept that every year I come up with something that I should, consider buy. And one of the things was I always said free advice is worth every cent. Right? and because what I realised was a lot of people will take your advice, you'll give them advice, your advice over the top of them, they don't do anything because actually there's no reason for them to pay attention to what you just told them.
I think the biggest learning thing for me was, and it comes back to what we were just talking about, if it's going to take somebody 2 to 3 years to write a good book, don't even blink an eye at dropping $20 on it, and just look for 1 or 2 takeaways and go implement them. Yeah. Like it is the best, cheapest results you can get anywhere.
And I think too that like going to like training or networking events or some sort of educational scenario, people go in there thinking they're going to change their life. And I always think if I can get one thing out of an event, like you go in with like a new client or learn something or just one thing, that's plenty. Like you can't even implement. You're flat pressed implementing 1 or 2 things anyway. Like someone give you 30 things to do tomorrow. Rarely will anybody do 30 things.
No one wants 30 things. Everybody wants 1 or 2 things, and that's all you really need.
Yeah, one little thing can make a difference. I think at the end of the day, right? You don't need to do a million things. It's just one little thing. And as you say, I found like in some cases what I've always done in my business to a degree is double my prices every few years and half my client base.
Yeah.
And
that works.
It works, right? And less stress and less hurry. And I think that's the big takeaway for most entrepreneurs is that don't take on everybody thinking that that's going to work, because at the end of the day, like you're going to end up in a situation where you're just going to have 80% of those people are not going to be profitable customers.
No.
You miss out on the nice 20% that actually, you've forgotten about and you've let them go because you're too busy with the complainers and they're not getting any money.
That makes total sense. And I think I'm very much going to follow in those footsteps as well.
Great. Nice work. It's funny how we all come to the same place, I think. I think it's almost like, you go through this whole cycle of entrepreneurship, and I think that everybody goes through the exact same cycle. The market pushes and punches you around. So like I said in the great saying, I reckon the great Mike Tyson said everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face. And then suddenly they go, whoa, now what am I going to do? So yeah, cool. So I really appreciate your time, Rocky, coming along. It's a lot of insights into, I think, what you do at the other end of it, and get there faster rather than just simply try to, as you say, increase revenues and get that vanity there. So it makes a lot of sense. So really appreciate your time. And we'll put your website up. So that's what's your website? That's called
ProfitComesFirst.com.
ProfitComesFirst.com. Cool. No worries. And we'll put the links up for everything else as well that you've given us, and encourage the listeners to have a little look at it. And I think you make a lot of sense. So that's fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me here tonight, John. Very much enjoyed chatting.
That's a wrap on another awesome episode for the Startup Secret Show for entrepreneurs. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we'd be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at startupsecrets.show right now. Until next time, if you're an entrepreneur, make a start on your next great business idea today.